can you guarantee to parents that schools will open and their children will be able to go to school on the days of the strikes?
I can't guarantee that, but we'll be working with head teachers to make sure as many schools are open for as many children as possible.
You're the
and
Education Secretary.
accepted.
The unions come in to see you. Why don't you talk about money?
Well, we did talk about money, but
They're saying that you didn't.
Well, they also said I only met with them for 45 minutes. I was with them an hour and 10 minutes. But we did talk about money. But
so
we didn't.
Isn't it wrong to say that?
We didn't negotiate the pay. That's not what we're there to do.
You say you'll be meeting union leaders today to try and avert the damaging action. When did you last have meetings with them, Secretary of State? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. I met them the first day back, actually, on the 9th. So that was my very first meeting, actually, in the new year. And then I will be meeting them tomorrow. And then
tomorrow or
today?
Today?
Be meeting them.
Tomorrow. It's tomorrow you're meeting. I'm seeing. OK.
Yeah.
Why can you not meet with them today? Because obviously time marches on. There's only a matter of, days before the industrial action is due to bite, Secretary of State.
Well, we'd already had these meetings set up, and there's also official meetings going on as well to share information.
Lots of people love their teachers. Lots of people won't blame the unions in all of this. They'll blame the government. They'll blame you, the Education Secretary.
Well, possibly, but if you look at the, across the piece, there is only one union that's gone out. So there's many, the two head unions, the other teaching union and the teaching assistant union. Well, the ballots, they didn't meet the, they didn't have enough people who met
Well, there were
threshold.
problems with the postal
so they
service,
have closed
according
their
to
ballots.
some of the unions as well.
This was a 3-month ballot, so 3 months is quite a long time, and many teachers will tell you they were getting many text messages and many sort of messages from the unions. So over 3 months, I think it's a reasonable time to conduct a ballot.
You believe, as per the Scottish legislation, 16-year-olds are old enough to decide to legally change their gender. Now, this is hugely significant for you as Education Secretary, because your Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is actually going to block that. You at odds with the Prime Minister on this?
Not at all, and that's not what I said. What I said is we will be publishing guidance and having quite a long consultation because it's a very tricky subject and we want to make sure that we support children in the right way. The two head teachers' unions, one of the other teachers' unions and the teaching assistant unions have not voted for strike action at this point. So hopefully the guidance that we issued last night to heads will hopefully they can keep as many schools open as possible for as many children as possible.
Just considering the answer you've just given me and listening to what you said, I wonder why then, in the current cost of living crisis, a survey of the NES-UWT union found that 54% of teachers are cutting back on their weekly food shop, 40% have slashed spending on essential household goods, 1 in 10 have taken second jobs to make ends meet. So if things are OK, why are we hearing this?
Well, the independent pay review body actually does take into account a lot of factors, but clearly inflation and the spike in inflation has had a massive impact on everybody, not just in our country actually, but everybody is feeling the pinch. Inflation eats away at the pound in your pocket.
Mary Bowstead said, and this is what she said, we talked about that education was very important, that teachers are very important, and we talked a bit about inflation, and we counted that wage rises are causing inflation. But no, we didn't talk about money, and we didn't talk about money either for this year or next year.
Well, what happened is we had a sort of wider discussion, and then the officials who were going to go through all the line-by-line submissions for the 27th followed up with a meeting on the Friday. Then we've got another meeting this week on Wednesday, and there's another meeting with officials all day.
Did you talk about money with the unions?
We talked about it in general, but we didn't go through line by line of the submission because they were starting to do that with the officials. But we talked about, the principles of what the
Do you not think it would have been important to
situations.
talk about money, and potentially you could have fended off this strike?
Do you believe the national education leaders, not the members, the leaders, do you believe they care about children, about pupils and about education?
Well, I mean, they would claim that they do, but I think
do you think they do?
To me, it seems unreasonable to have.
I think it's unreasonable to have strike action. You know, we're still having discussions. Clearly, they only just got over the threshold. Less than half of the teachers from that union actually voted for strike action. So 53% turnout, but I think 90% of those voted for strike action. So it does seem to be unreasonable, particularly given all that our children have endured really during the pandemic. She asked me, I think one of the previous, it was Kay actually, whether I thought people could make their decisions at 16. I said, look, at 16 I was working, I was paying tax, but all 16-year-olds are different. Obviously everybody has a different view. It's really, really important that we take into account parents' views, teachers' views, children's views, and other stakeholders' views as well, because it is quite tricky. But what I said was, for me, myself, I felt able to take decisions for myself at 16. But of course, I was, I'd grown up quite quickly, and I was actually working full-time at 16.
We didn't negotiate pay, but what we did do was talk about some of the challenges, workload challenges as well, we talked about. And we've gone through for next year, and we will, by now they will have gone through, but there's I think it's a 6-hour meeting that's scheduled on Friday to go through line by line as well.
So she's being disingenuous to say that she came and you wouldn't talk about money?
I mean,
If the legislation that's being pushed forward by your colleague Grant Shapps are in place concerning minimum service levels during disputes, would that make a difference to the industrial action we're looking at with the teachers? Would you welcome that?
Well, the vote went through last night, so that's the first stage of it, and it was voted through. I mean, all we're trying to do there is to make sure that we have the minimum service safety levels in place. It's going to initially focus on health and rail, and education is in there, but we're hoping not to use it for education because at the moment we're not at that stage.
If you don't want to use it, why is it in there?
Well, because we may have to. Not every 16-year-old is the same as I was at 16. I think, obviously,
so
many
you
more
would have been
of us left
capable
school.
of making that decision?
I think at 16 I was, fully working, and I was making a lot of decisions at 16. I was even making decisions on behalf of my business at 16. So I think it's...
So you would have been capable. You'd agree then with the principle of the legislation. You would have been capable to make that decision.
It's a really tricky issue. Every 16-year-old is different. I did grow up a lot faster in Liverpool than many other 16-year-olds perhaps do today. 16-year-old, it's a very difficult age. We need to support children. But what she asked me is whether I was capable of making decisions at 16, and of course I was, because I was working full time. I was doing, I was reasonably grown up at that for a 16-year-old. But that's not every 16-year-old.